Good morning and welcome back to your Hebrew Nation Morning Show, where Hebrews from all over the world gather to share and listen about the biblical roots of our faith. Sit back with your favorite morning brew and join the conversation. Lines are now open, so call 503-967-3001. 503-967-3001. Nation, His kingdom, His people, and your radio station.
Well, here we are on the second hour of the Remnant Road for September 4th, 2017, Labor Day here in the United States. This is Al McCarn, and I'm sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mike Clayton is with us, driving somewhere on I-70 toward St. Louis. And from way out west, Idaho Falls, Idaho, joining us on the Remnant Road for the first time, Tyler Dawn Rosenquist. Welcome, Tyler, to the show.
Thank you. I'm very honored that you had me. Thank you.
Well, it is a great honor for us to have you with us. Now, you're no stranger to Hebrew Nation. You were with Kimberly and Teresa last year a couple of times on Cup of Hebrews, but yeah. This is your first visit with us here on the Remnant Road. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, let's see. Name's Tyler Dawn Rosenquist. I started out in grown-up ministry. My blog is called theancientbridge.com, where I write about character, and I write about my studies into the ancient Near Eastern first century context of Scripture. Started out learning from Rico Cortez and Ryan White, and got kind of sucked in under that umbrella. So we all work together now, and about 2 years ago, God really upturned my apple cart in a big way, and told me, he says, I want you to write all this context that you're doing into books for children. I said, excuse me? Anyone who knows me will tell you that I am the least likely candidate for children's ministry who was ever born.
You know, that's interesting, because you and I have been friends on Facebook for several months now. And I remember seeing you, well, first of all, you post all these prescient words of wisdom, all of these zingers that get us to rethink things that we might say or do. You know, you're one of these common sense folks, and that's why I appreciate what you're saying.
Oh, thanks.
But there was a time 2 or 3 months ago you said something about, not reaching out to try to teach adults anymore, but focusing on kids.
Right. It's been a transition over the last 2 years. I'll tell you something, it's hard giving up adult ministry, because that is where all the glory is. It's where all the kudos are, and it's also where all the money is. But, if we were actually doing that, would we be in this movement? No. No, we wouldn't. We'd be back.
No, we'd be in Tulsa talking about prosperity there, Tyler.
There you go.
I can tell you that...
with the people who tithe.
Yeah, you talk about, right. Well, maybe not. That's another subject. Tulsa is a subject for me, but, there's an interesting thing you just said about the kudos in the adult ministry. I travel full time. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and I can tell you that when a young person, especially, 8, 9, 10 years old, or even a teenager, who come up to me and say, Mr. Mike, I really enjoyed what you said. Let me tell you, that's my. You give me 100 adults that are trying to be nice to you, say they enjoyed it, versus one child, because the kids won't lie. The kids will tell you the truth, and they'll look at you and they're bored, or they'll come to you and say, when they say, hey, I enjoyed that. And so I've worked with Brad for a long time, and me and Brad were having a conversation at a conference recently, and the word came up of next generation. And I turned around and I said, I refuse, and I actually told you this, don't allow me to tell you the next generation. You're not waiting for us to die out in the wilderness before you can do something. So I've begun to coin the phrase that this is the rising generation. And it is our responsibility to be a part of their lives to help them to rise to the place that the Father's calling them to.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, this generation's just different. They just really are. They're amazing. They're not like me growing up. They're not. And I always do say we need to die off in the wilderness and get out of their way. But I can only teach what I can teach. We need other children's ministers out there too. I don't think that everyone should be doing it my way. I do history and character. My friend Sarah Hawks Valente, she writes wonderful books. She's writing a book right now dealing with the transgendered issue among little kids from the Torah point of view.
Wow.
About sexual confusion. Why she's doing one where she's saying, it's okay for a boy to be artistic and musically inclined like David. And it's okay for a girl to be strong like Deborah. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But today we've made it so much complicated so the kids are taking their inborn talents and it's causing them to doubt their sexuality.
That is true. And I have heard it said, and I believe it is true, that our young people today face a lot more difficulty, obstacles than we did.
Oh, and look at the social media.
Yes.
Look how we behave on social media. What are we setting them up for? Oh.
And Tyler, this is what got my attention.
Well, the thing is, what the key is? Make it about yourself, and then They can't take offense. Because everyone who's known me longer than you have knows that I was a classic Torah terrorist. When I first came in, I was horrifying. Of course, I was horrifying before I came into Torah, too. But it just set me free. It just gave me entirely new ways to be insufferable. But I behaved so badly, and I did it thinking, and I thought that separateness was holiness. Divisiveness kind of separated, was holiness. And we're really setting our kids up to be an insufferable generation. And so a lot of what I focus on is how to be decent to people online. Because they're anonymous, and it's easy to think that they're not real human beings. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that I'm dressing down and demeaning this man in front of an audience, and he is going to go home and he's going to take it out on his kids, and that's on me, not just on him.
Yes, and I've succumbed to that too. I'll read something online. It's not directed at me, but it might touch an issue that's very important to me, and the person has written about it in demeaning terms, or they've written about someone who I've really benefited from his or her teachings and calling this person a false prophet. And I'm thinking, have you sat down and talked with him? Do you know his heart? And that just, sometimes there's a black cloud over my head for the rest of the day when I read that, and I got to repent for it.
Right, but we're introspective about that. Not everyone is introspective. A lot of people focus all of their criticism outward, whereas I think it's much more profitable to focus the majority of it inward, not in a way that's counterproductive, where we're, I'm just the most horrible person alive. But whereas I'm not as bad today as I was yesterday, but I know I am not an accurate image bearer of my master. Working towards that. Never satisfied, but for where I am.
Al, you're aware that I don't do Facebook, I don't do Twitter, I don't do Instagram, all that stuff. I just don't like computers. And it's amazing. I sit in front of one hours and hours a day because I have to. But I've had conversations, Al, you've been a part of that when somebody attacks you on Facebook, take it private. There's no reason to have this discussion in a public setting, because all it becomes is this kind of a spitting contest that I have to win. So if somebody says something, I find that there are people that, Tyler, that they are energized by that attack. And it's like, okay, now I have to go back and prove something. Instead of just let it go or take it private, which is pretty much going to come to making the end to it. But that social media thing becomes its own self-fulfilling, part of who I am identity.
Right. Well, I mean, that's classic. That's classic what we see going on between Yeshua and some of the Pharisees. Obviously not all of the Pharisees. I remind everybody that every single Pharisee given by name in Scriptures was a righteous man.
Yes.
But you would have these honor battles because they thought there was only so much honor to go around in a community, and if I want to increase my honor, I've got to steal yours. And so they were trying to constantly steal Yeshua's honor so theirs would be elevated. And so they had these violent battles of words. Sermon on the Mount is all about not doing that anymore and treating each other with dignity and taking things private when there is, and I don't always do that either. 1% of the time, no, more than that. If you get me on one of my real issues, every time.
This is a good way to go back to what you do for a living, Tyler. I'm looking at your homepage on your website, Context for Kids. Now, you describe yourself as chief goofball at Context for Kids.
Yes,
I appreciate that. But let me just scroll down some of the titles you have on these posts. You've got the Beatitudes, a full 5-part series on it. You have the sons of Herod. Who was Herod the Great? Who were the Hasmonean priest kings? Biblical geography. Now, I can remember in growing up in Sunday school and growing up in a Christian school, we would learn about the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, but King Herod was just a footnote.
Right.
And we certainly never heard the term Hasmonean. Right. And here you have all these series of lessons that you want to impart to our young people. So why is that important, and what kind of a response have you received?
Well, the reason I do it is because, you get two kinds of people talking to kids. You got the people who talk in a little baby voice. You got me, and I talk to them the way I talk to you. I don't like for anyone to be demeaned in any way, shape, or form. I don't even talk to babies in that voice.
Yeah.
I take children very seriously. And it's not that I can get silly. Being silly is not the same as not taking the person I'm talking to seriously. I take them absolutely seriously. I'm just not taking myself seriously. But I believe that they have every much right to know the context of Bible as John the Baptist and Yeshua knew. They knew who Herod the Great was. They knew who the sons of Herod were. All these things, all these little tidbits, and that's just covering Matthew 1 and like the first paragraph of Matthew 2, all those ones that I did. They don't have to watch them, but I want them to be available if they have those questions. I mean, a lot of the stuff I teach is only going to be teen level. I actually have a rating system. G-rated, PG, PG-13, and R, depending. The crucifixion is a flat-out R-rated teaching. And I tell parents they need to preview it first before they have me teaching their kids something they may not want them to hear. But I believe that when you're teaching children, you shouldn't demean them, that you should slow the material down, but you should never, ever dumb it down. Ever. You may withhold some information because it's not quite there, but you treat your audience with respect no matter who they are.
I think I hear that in response from youth a lot of times, and Tyler, I can relate to you of I'm like the last person in the world to talk to children or youth. I grew up in a very adult environment. Nobody ever baby talk to me. I didn't do that to my own children, but I tried to never talk down to them. And so I want to take them from where they are, raise them up to a new level, and you can't do that by talking down to them.
No, kids love
talking to them like they're dumb. Yeah, they do.
They love it when you speak to them in a normal voice. They love it. I used to live when I was in Minnesota, I lived next to a daycare center. And the kids loved me. I would sit at the fence and tell them stories. It's a home-based daycare center. And I would always talk to them like adults, and they just were drawn to me. Mm-hmm. They were yearning for acceptance and respect and dignity. Dignity, there it is. There it is. Kids are yearning for dignity.
I tell you, another thing that I see in the youth, especially today, is they're looking for someone to challenge them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To not just accept the fact that, okay, you're youth, you're in this environment, you're going to have to deal with this. No, if you try to challenge them and you challenge them to a level above where they're living. I looked at a bunch of youth the other day. I was asked to speak to a large youth group, and I said, I walked in and they were looking at me like the old guy, which is what I was. But, I said to them, okay, you guys are, 14, 15, 16 years old in this room. I said, most of you are only hanging out with people that are 14, 15, and 16. So guess what? The only wisdom you can get is the maximum you can get is a 16-year-old wisdom. How's that working out for you?
Ouch.
And they all kind of looked at me like, whoa, yeah, that spoke. And I actually had youth come to me later and say, could I talk to you? Because I'm challenging them to something that they haven't been challenged to. I'm not just putting them into a different room so the adults can, get smart.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Yeah, I
that
know.
Infuriates me. And, you go to a conference and you do a children's program, which I refuse to do anymore, frankly. They'll put you into a hallway, or all the parents will just leave their kids with you for 8 hours, expecting you to babysit them, and they didn't give them any treats or anything. I can't be with children that long at a time, actually. 2 hours, and there's going to be,
blood.
It's going to be on the news.
Yeah.
Not in a good way. But children's church has always been babysitting. I haven't noticed that changing since, coming to
my wife, who's sitting next to me as we're driving on the road, she did children's church when I was a pastor in Florida. And one of the things that she refused to do was just be a babysitter.
Yay!
She challenged those children in discipline. She was using a lot of the stuff by Bill Wilson out of New York at the time. And I mean, it was these children that had never seen discipline before in their lives. Kathy was bringing them to a place that they were understanding discipline, they were understanding rewards, they were understanding reality. And, it doesn't have to be the babysitting. It depends on our attitude toward them.
Absolutely. No, and there are a lot of good children's ministers out there. There are. There absolutely are, and I wish that there were more of them. But, I mean, job one is taking the kids seriously, treating them, I mean, let's face it, we don't treat them like they're the next generation by and large. We treat them, and the worst thing is, and I've got to say this, and I'm sorry if I'm going to make trouble for you, Al, because I never make trouble for anyone, but I'm going to make an exception here.
Oh, thank you.
There's this really disturbing trend in the Hebrew Roots movement, Messianic movement. And we grew up with Jesus, right? We grew up with a personal relationship I didn't come to him until I was 29 years old. I was a heathen child, but I started out with a very close personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Then I come to Torah, and I ditched him for years. Very typical story. And so because I ditched him, hey, guess what? So did my kids. And they were, 10 years old and had never been to church because, well, we don't need to go into that. I was in the out-of-church movement. I was in a very bad place. And so I got this idea that all I had to do was teach Torah to my kids because Torah equals Yeshua. Well, how is that working out?
Tyler, you'll be probably excited to know that in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 2 weeks ago, I gave an altar call.
Did you?
We had an 8-year-old young lady come to a relationship with Yeshua.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Oh, I'm going to cry. Okay. I'm going to stop. I'm going to just calm down. But you get this idea in the Hebrew Roots movement that Torah equals Yeshua, therefore all I need to do is preach pure Torah and they'll just get it.
Yeah.
Not
but
so much.
We had that background. We had that first love instilled into us, and we had a few things about Torah wrong. But we kept most of it as Christians.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't taking the right days off of work, and, you know, we didn't have the mezuzah up. But we were taking care of the poor widows and orphans. We were doing the weightier matters.
Yeah.
I just wrote on this, Tyler, in my last commentary on the ones that Amalek was attacking was those that were weary and those that were straggling. And I likened our youth to the ones that are straggling. Why? Because we haven't taught them about Yeshua.
Amen. Absolutely. I made that mistake myself.
Now, who among us has not made the mistake? And Tyler, this gets to something that has weighed on me recently as well. You know, and lately in the last few weeks, I've gone back to my Christian roots, you know, listening to those worship songs that meant so much 20 years ago, 10 years ago. The only way that I remained connected to my God for so many years was by singing in a choir in church and actually singing scripture. But it has occurred to me, and you know, we actually put this, Pete Rambo and I are writing a book on this subject, and I've put this in there, is the reunion of Ephraim and Judah could not have happened before now.
No.
Because we had to have 2,000 years as a people, you know, as Christian, 2,000 years of Christian history, to come into a relationship with our Creator by the Messiah that He sent for that purpose, so that we can be a testimony to the world of Yahweh's grace, His redemption, His mercy, His plans to, and willingness and ability to fulfill His promises of redemption. And by the way, be a testimony to Judah at the same time.
Yes.
Judah, on the other hand, they've got Torah. They do have relationship with the Father. I have seen this.
Yes.
And it blows my mind that they don't have the same formula that we had of receive Jesus into your heart. I don't understand it, but I have seen evidence of the relationship they have with the Father.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, so we have two witnesses here in Ephraim and Judah, Jews and Christians, however you want to, you know, say that. Therefore, we have got to cling tightly to the Messiah who brought us into the relationship with the Father and pick up the Torah that He taught as well.
Yeah, you know, I compare it. I always say it's sometimes we act like a loose woman who can't remember who brought us to the dance.
Oh, yes.
And I don't usually actually say it that nicely, but
Hey, we are
on that one.
Yeah,
I could use harlot. I could say harlot because that's in the Bible. There we go.
Hey, we're coming up on a break, unfortunately, but we'll continue this on the other side. This is the Remnant Road on Hebrew Nation. Al McCarn and Mike Clayton. We're talking with Tyler Don Rosenquist. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm nobody special, for sure. I mean, I'm a carpenter. They could have revealed this to big preachers, big.
Freedom shout rising up from under your feet. If we lift up our voices and call on the Lord, He will come. And the nations will see that salvation comes from Zion.
Here we are on the last segment of the Remnant Road for September 4th. This is Al McCarn. We did have Mike Clayton with us, but he has now rung off because he and Kathy are about to go through St. Louis, and we certainly wouldn't want to distract him while he's driving. But we still have Tyler Don Rosenquist with us. Tyler, we got a lively half-hour discussion ahead of us.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, we were talking on the other side of the break, mentioned some of the things you have on your website, Context for Kids. Now, on your other website, The Ancient Bridge, that's where we have links to your books. And I think is it 5 now that you've published?
Yeah, actually, I'm almost done writing my 6th. The last one took me a year to write. I mean, a year. Because it was so grueling and difficult. In this last one, I haven't even been working on it, I don't think, 2 months. It just depends.
Yeah. Now, how did you get into writing?
I don't know. How'd you start breathing? I mean, that's the thing. We all have our gifts. Things that we do as naturally as breathing. I look at some of my co-teachers at Wisdom and Torah, and I watch them make videos and just do broadcasts, and my jaws dropping down because I struggle to do the video teachings, and the only reason I do them is because no one else is doing them for the kids. But if somebody would like to, I will step aside. But it's like the 3rd layer of hell for me. The layer that's right above driving a school bus for eternity. I don't like making videos, but it's important to me that it gets done. But I will step aside, like I said, as soon as somebody volunteers. Hint, hint.
Well,
but I'm a writer, and I've always been a writer. Ever since, I think in high school, I know what it was in college. I'm a chemist, but I had to take an English class. And so I would always write my papers the night before they were due. I would sit at the typewriter. Now we all know how old I am. Mm-hmm. And I would type it out completely on the typewriter. No going back, no changing anything. Absolutely, completely ordered in my mind from beginning to end. And I would get an A every time. And my professor called me up and he says, "All right, Tyler, everyone seems to be having a lot of trouble with their essays, so why don't you tell us what your writing process is?" And I said, "Oh, no." And I told him, I said, "Well, I read the assignment, and then I think about it for a few days, and then I compose it on the typewriter the night before." And he went white. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he never called me up again. But, I mean, I'm unique. I mean, there aren't many people who can do that. But I was given that talent for this, what I do.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm smarter than any other writer. It's because I was supposed to do this and someone quit. It's just what I do.
Yeah. Well, speaking as a fellow writer, I can understand this. But so
I mean, I'll
books...
write 10,000 words one day, and next day I can't write anything. It's...
Oh, been there too. Been there a lot. So now, your books are available. Where can we get them?
Amazon. Amazon.com has all my books. If you want in bulk, contact me. And that's easy enough to do. My email address is all over all my videos and blogs and everything, so it's easy to find me. Yeah. But I don't handle like 1 or 2 book orders because I had a stroke 20 years ago, and that part of my brain is kind of scrambled. And so organizing my actual life, until my husband retires, there will be no orders, unless they're really big, taken care of by me, because he has a mind like a steel trap. So.
All right, and your two websites are theancientbridge.com and contextforkids.com.
Right, and not the number 4 because I'm really not that hip. It's actually FOR.
Yeah.
Wasn't clever enough to make it look interesting.
So I'm looking down the list of titles here, and you have The Bridge, Crossing Over into the Fullness of Covenant Life.
Yeah, that's an apologetic I wrote to try and get new Torah people through the first 2 years of being insufferable without being insufferable.
Oh boy, do we need that one. And then we have the Context for Kids, volumes 1, 2, and so on. We have Honor and Shame in the Bible, 10 Commandments and the Covenants of Promise. Oh, this one I like. King, Kingdom, Citizen, His Reign and Our Identity.
Yeah, I wrote that a couple of years back. There was such a big brouhaha where there were some messianic leaders who were teaching that there was a tiered system within the kingdom. You've got your Jews on top, and you've got your, former Gentiles on the bottom, way on the bottom. And so I wrote, I just did a brief overview of a whole bunch of ancient Near Eastern concepts, but I go through the fact that God really is a king of a real kingdom. Yeah, there is a real kingdom, a literal kingdom. Here, let's see, and of course you've got the heir to the kingdom, Messiah, and then our rights as citizens, our expectations, our obligations as citizens, and I went through the whole brouhaha that was going on in the first century, go heavily into Romans. I actually did Galatians verse by verse at the end, going off of Rico Cortez's, it was Rico Cortez's teaching that spurred me about Paul working as an adoption attorney.
Oh.
Really, or immigration attorney, not an adoption attorney, an immigration attorney. Where do the Gentiles fit in? Do they have to get circumcised? This, and that, and I went through that. So.
We had a very enlightening discussion about that over Shabbat on that very question from Galatians. And what did circumcision mean in a first century context?
Yeah, people think, yeah.
Right. So more than just a surgical procedure, but actual formal and expensive and time-consuming conversion to Judaism.
Yes. And not just any Judaism, that kind of Judaism that's practiced in that community, Yeah,
right.
Because it's not monolithic. Judaism has never been monolithic.
No. Now, and this is getting back to some of those titles of your videos and Context for Kids. This is essential. I never learned the ancient Near East or first century Judean or Greco-Roman context for anything. But you have this teaching on, the Hasmoneans. Why should I know about the Hasmoneans?
Because they explain why Rome was in charge. Because Israel had the chance to rule themselves, and they proved just as corrupt rulers as the people before or later. Not only that, but Simon Maccabeus, so it's not really his name, but Simon, the last of the Hasmonean brothers, he was just made an ethnarch, a prince, until such time as a prophet would come and tell them what to do about the kingship. Well, his grandson decided to make himself an actual king. And that was the beginning of the end. And it just got uglier and uglier. And the door was left wide open for Rome because of the corruption. It's very important to know.
It is. And there are some famous names involved. People like Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra.
Yeah. The whole thing about Mark Antony totally giving Herod's land away to Cleopatra over and over again was actually pretty hilarious.
Well, it is. And folks, I remember 1963, there was, oh heavens, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton in Cleopatra. Never did I make the connection between that spectacular blockbuster movie and actual events that affected my faith.
Right, I know.
I mean, but that's what brought Herod the Great into power, and his dynasty ruled Judea for the next 100 years. And if you want to know why things were as they were in Judea, why Yeshua and the disciples did things the way they did them, You got to know the historical
and
context.
where they did them, because being up in Galilee was a heck of a lot different than being down in Judea.
That's right. So, kudos to you and praise the Almighty for calling you to this particular niche, this ministry of putting it in context, not just for our young people, but for all of us, because there are so many of us adults who have no clue. So,
well, I think I have more adult students than kids, actually. I'm not sure. And I was teaching the hardcore history. I'm cutting down to doing the hardcore history once a month, and once a month I'm going to do a 5-part teaching on some aspect of the Sermon on the Mount. Then 2 weeks later, one of my, like my next one are who are the Roman governors.
Oh yeah.
But I was doing these every week, and it was just killing me because the amount of study that goes into one of these hardcore teachings was like, ugh, and no one was watching them.
Mm.
It's a little too intense, I think.
It just might be, but yeah,
But
the Roman governors
weren't.
No.
Yeah, I know, they were crazy.
Crazy. So who have we got? We've got Pilate, but he was procurator, but that kind of.
Well, he was a prefect, actually. The procurators weren't named that until the reign of Caligula.
Isn't this cool? Now, I could just go on and on with this being a historian, but I'm not, because let me ask you about your latest book.
Oh, my Context Not for Kids.
Yes, folks.
The only reason it's actually called Context for Adults is because I don't think it's legal to call it Context for Kids.
Probably not. So here it is, Context for Adults, Sexuality, Social Identity, and Kinship Relations in the Bible.
And yet there is nothing in that book that wouldn't be common knowledge to a kid growing up in Israel.
Yes.
It's just not legal for me to teach people's kids this, but this is the questions that kids ask when we read the Torah.
So it is. So what questions are they asking, and what are you answering?
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is, the whole deal is people, especially unbelievers, skeptics, whatever, they have good questions, and so do kids. There's like, well, why was Jacob a polygamist? We're not going to go into that right here. But, why did Jacob...
Could we call Jacob the accidental polygamist?
Well, it wasn't... Well, no, it was kind of a forced... You know what? There's just a whole chapter, and it's so much context. It's really... The handmaidens were not his wives, because they never are called his wives. They're always called the women or the handmaidens. They're also not usually named. They're not given the same honor in Scripture as Leah.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I was just thinking it might be a good title for a comedy, but we'll not go there. No.
We've got so many. So it's like, well, why were Abraham and Isaac allowed to lie about their, wives being their sisters? Aren't they supposed to be righteous? Why did Rebecca have to marry Isaac without ever seeing him? Because girls ask that question. Well, why did Isaac have to marry Rebecca without ever seeing her first? What did Laban gain by tricking Jacob? Why wouldn't Laban come into Rachel's tent? Now that one's funny. Was Dinah actually raped? Did
Yes.
Jacob? Nope. Did Jacob actually force his daughter to marry a rapist?
Yeah, I mean, yes, as in that's a question. Was she raped?
I'm sorry. Actually, scholars debate it. Ryan White and he actually, in his master's thesis, I read it after having written it. It's like, oh, you just said the same thing I did. Yes. It's nice to have somebody else say, why did the Levite cut his concubine into pieces, mail her all over Israel? What is this about marrying female prisoners of war? Why is slavery allowed? Why were the Benjamites allowed to capture wives? Well, this is a big one. I actually did a Context for Kids video on this. Why was Tamar judged righteous when she posed as a prostitute?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and folks, if you're hearing all of these things and saying, where's that in the Bible? Oh, yeah, it's all there.
Yeah,
It is all there.
The first 10 chapters and the last 5 of this are absolutely G-rated, and it goes into dyadic social identity, which is the community mindset that they had, which is completely foreign to us, and without it, it's very difficult to understand these situations in scriptures. But once you understand honor and shame, dyadic social identity, their non-scientific mindset, because they were spiritual, not scientific. Even the most spiritual of us is scientific first. We just don't realize it. And then their kinship ideas were completely different than ours. Once we put all those together, we start looking at these situations and go, okay, I see what they were doing, because one of the mistakes we make, and I made it for years, is we think that the Bible tells us what people should have done, when often the only thing it tells us is what they actually did do. And so we see Abraham lying, and we think, well, why did he get away with that? It's like, that's the wrong question. The right question is, why did he think that was okay? What within the cultural milieu was that acceptable? Why was it absolutely natural for him to lie? Because in honor and shame societies, you didn't tell outsiders the truth. Plain and simple. It was as natural as, it was the way they thought. Why was Lot willing to throw his daughters to a rape gang? Yeah. Makes perfect sense if you understand the ancient laws of hospitality, even though it's abhorrent to us. Yes. And yet Peter called Lot righteous. Peter understood it. So anyway, we've got all these questions. People ask them, and then what do? We say, well, we just remember that God is good. Well, you know what? No one buys that. They're good questions. Yes. They deserve good answers. And so, yes, people can have their teenagers read it. My kids have been my poor kids, been learning all this stuff forever, and I never pulled any punches. But this is the kind of thing where at least adults can read it, and then when their kids are old enough to ask the question, they can get an answer. And people will have answers for unbelievers, because this was common knowledge to kids in Bible times. They knew why Esau's wives were so revolting. They would go, oh yeah, those Hittites, dang. We don't. No,
we don't. Quite frankly, we say, what's a Hittite?
Why? Because I've said some troublesome things, but I'm not saying that. But, yeah, it's important. It's time for us to stop being embarrassed by our Bibles. And if we knew the context, we'd say, oh, well, that's just who they were. And this was the reality of the world at that time. Yeah. We don't have to wish it away or pretend like those verses don't exist. They do. Steal them.
This has so many practical applications. I'm thinking of, over my lifetime, I spent a considerable amount of time in combat zones in the Middle East. Well, Iraq twice, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. But all that time that I, as a professional warrior, am dealing with Islamic societies, guess what? I'm coming face to face with these same social situations that you are describing.
Yes, you are. Absolutely, because 2/3 of the world is honor shame.
Yep.
To this day. And places like the Middle East, they still practice a dyadic group-centered social identity, which means that you don't exist apart from your group. You are not an individual. Your ideas about your worth and value come from meeting other people's expectations. It's honorable to lie to outsiders, but you owe your family absolute loyalty. You protect your women with your life, but if they become a liability, you kill them.
Yes. Not to say, I mean, what you have described is totally reprehensible to us in the West.
Yes.
But there's a logic to it. Yeah, there's a logic to it. And I'll tell you, folks, the United States of America, the Defense Department of the United States of America, And all the armed services of the United States of America have had to come to grips with this thing. We have had to redo our way of making policy and diplomacy and making war, because we have been operating now for a generation, active operations in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Syria now. And we have had to learn how these societies work, and they do work exactly like you have described, Tyler.
Do you know who talks to, I watch him on the news every once in a while. You know who does know how to talk to them in their language? Donald Trump.
Yes.
People get really angry at him, and I'm saying, oh, no, baby, he just spoke to them in their language. It's offensive to you because you think they think like us and that they should think like us, and it's only natural that everyone should think like us. But he just said something very specific to them in their language.
Yes.
Yeah. Because he's business world. He's had to deal with the Middle East forever.
Indeed he has. Indeed he has. So it would do a lot better, I think, for us if we could learn these things for ourselves and teach our young people.
Yeah,
teach our children.
We don't have to be scholars. You know, I write these books because the books that I read are not written for normal people. They're written to make normal people feel stupid because, you know, some of these books, I'm sitting there with a dictionary on my lap, and that's just not necessary. But these scholars, they're writing for other scholars, and so they use words that don't even pop up in normal people's English language. And they write these long, twisting sentences, and it's like, you know, most people learn at the level of a child. And I don't say that insultingly. I say that because that's the best way to learn.
Yes.
When
yes,
stuff is just written just basic English, and, you know, they don't have to say, well, there are no leaps in logic, because that's one of the things that drives me nuts about adult books is they make these huge leaps in logic. And unless you have enough knowledge base behind you, you have no idea where they just went.
Yep.
But I write books for normal people because I wish that I could read books written by normal people. Of course, John Walton writes books for normal people. Thank you, John Walton. And a few other guys, but not many.
Yeah. So this is a great service. You're working as a translator.
As a translator. Even blondes can understand my books.
Oh my.
I'm a blonde. Okay, I'm a dishwater blonde now, but that was, you know, hey, between us blondes, you know, we tell the best jokes. So.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're coming down to sadly, the last minute and a half. So let me give you a chance to plug your website and give us your last thought.
Okay, well, Context for Kids and .com and theancientbridge.com. I also have the Context for Kids YouTube channel. I have my YouTube channel for grown-ups. It's under my name, Tyler Dawn Rosenquist. My books are available on Amazon under Tyler Dawn Rosenquist with, yes, actually is my name, not a pen name. Someone actually named me Tyler in the 60s.
It's a good name.
Well, it actually means doorkeeper. Is the Old English word for the person who stands by the door and allows people in. So I like that, actually. It's kind of what I do. I'm the entry-level person, and I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's a good job. I deal with the most genuine people there at the door.
That would be so, everybody. So, and it's a good fight. You're certainly fulfilling that role quite well. And so thanks for sharing with us a little bit of what you do here on the Remnant Road. And I'm looking forward to checking out some of your videos and maybe reading some of your books. So
I appreciate you having me on. It was very generous to share your platform with me.
Well, you've made it fun.
I try to be fun.
Yeah, it has been. It has been. So, folks, we are at the end of another show, and on behalf of my co-host Mike Clayton and Hanok Young, thanks for listening. For Tyler Dawn Rosenquist, thank you for brightening our day this Monday morning, September 4th. And to all of us, all of you out there in Hebrew Nation world, Shavua Tov, we'll be back next week.
This is Mike